Come on, Joe. Do it with me. Do it with me. Put it up. Put it up. The U. Look at the camera. The U. Once again, an ACC squad is in the Final Four. This is 5 different ACC squads that have made the Final Four in the last 5 years. You've had Virginia, Syracuse, North Carolina, Duke, and then now Miami. Miami, and I've seen a lot of the Miami fans in my mentions have, the Atlas, holding up the world with a U logo while the ACC is the thing that they're holding up. And little did I know, Joe, that John Swofford was playing 4D chess years ago when he added Miami to the ACC. The real reason why Miami was brought to the ACC, it wasn't for football, where they've done bupkis. The real reason why is because Miami's been one of the more consistent basketball programs in the ACC since Jim Larrañaga has taken over. So there's 2 conversations here. There's just how good is the ACC based on these Final Four results compared to other conferences, and then there's specifically Jim Larrañaga and what he's been able to do at Miami. Real quickly on the Cuban. Shout out to the Cubans. Larrañaga is what you want to be when you get older. He's 73 years old. He looks like he absolutely still enjoys what he does, and he has not looked at the changes in college basketball, gone on national programs, and lamented, man, I don't recognize this game anymore while I'm making millions of dollars. I just don't recognize what's going on anymore as I'm utilizing the transfer portal and NIL money. He's open about it. And I think that's come through, and I think that the schools and the coaches that are open about it and embrace it will be rewarded in the same way that Jim Larrañaga was rewarded with yet another Final Four appearance. So that's 2. That makes you a Hall of Famer, man. You make it to the Final Four with George Mason and Miami, and that kind of puts you in the conversation to be one of the great coaches.
Closing in on 700 wins.
Impressive, just absolutely impressive. Now to the ACC. I wanted to praise Jim Larrañaga.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we spend so much time in the ACC talking about the coaches that don't coach anymore, or the other old man who looks like he's miserable all the time, Jim Boeheim. But specifically to the ACC. When Miami when they came back and they beat Texas, it didn't take long to open up social media and see people just pointing out, oh, look at that. The ACC was being trashed all year long, and yet again, here they are in the Final Four. Where's your precious Big Ten now? Where's your mighty West Coast Conference? What about the SEC? What about them? The ACC is back, baby. So the results are the results, Joe. And if we're going to SEC football this thing, well, if you keep making it to these Final Fours, tells me your conference is a hell of a lot better. Heck, don't take my word for it. Take Isaiah Wong's word for it. He went meat grinder. Full on ACC meat grinder where it just means more, Joe.
I'll just say I'll thank the ACC for preparing us for these types of games. Just coming in, every game we played in the ACC, it's always a close game. It's always a shot to win, and I feel like coming into March, we've been in those types of situations, and we played good, and we wasn't afraid or scared in any situation, and we just stuck together and played together throughout the game. And I would just say thank you, appreciate for the ACC for the competition.
Isaiah Wong did more for the ACC narrative than any freaking coach did this year. Props to him, man. Good for him.
2 things can be true at once.
Sure.
Miami can be a good team. The ACC wasn't a good conference this year, though.
Okay.
Like Miami beating Texas yesterday. And by the way, I would argue the Big 12 was the best conference in college basketball this year. They have no teams in the Final Four.
How many Big 12 teams are not?
They have no teams in the Final Four. But I would argue that the Big 12 was the best conference in college basketball this year. Miami beating Texas doesn't change that Louisville went 4-28. Miami beating Texas does not change that Notre Dame went 11-21.
Mm-hmm.
Miami beating Texas does not change that Florida State went 9-23. Those 3 teams were god awful this year. Terrible. Like, statistically impossible for Louisville to win 4 games. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Louisville's the one who brought everybody down, including Clemson, who they beat.
Mm-hmm.
Clemson made the mistake of losing to Louisville. So the result doesn't change how the teams are getting into the tournament. And Jim Phillips is going to have this, symposium with ACC coaches coming up here. He told ESPN that they were going to meet Or talk about how they could change the narrative.
Change the narrative.
How about this? Change the scheduling and how you schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Because you talked about the Mountain West and how that's helped. How these conferences statistically, metrically, efficiency-wise, have a higher rate in the ACC. It's all scheduling hocus pocus that we've learned from the RPI. Don't play too many games at home, and don't play any teams in the 300s.
Yeah.
Start with that. Okay? Number 2, scheduling-wise, and this is why a lot of people argue about the Big 12, because did they have any great teams?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously not. They don't have a team in the Final Four. But they had 10 teams that were all really good, as was evidenced by Oklahoma beating Alabama, the number 1 overall seed in the tournament, by nearly 30 points. So that game was played in the middle of the season. Mm-hmm. We talked to Jim Phillips. We specifically said to him, now that the Big Ten is out of ESPN's umbrella, you need to schedule a challenge either against the Big 12 or the SEC, and it needs to be played in the middle of conference play to give yourself another data point to be compared to, because right now the cake is being baked at the beginning of the season in the non-conference schedule, and you can't get out of that.
Yeah.
They need to schedule better games in the non-conference. That's number 1. That is priority number 1. That's how they're going to change the quote-unquote narrative about the league. Not bragging about now having 3 Final Four teams, which is as many as all of the other Power 5 conferences combined. That's great.
Yeah.
That's a great talking point. But it doesn't change how bad your other teams were.
How about these metrics? The 12 seed, the 4 seed, the 1 seed, and the 2 seed. Did Miami's net go down along the way?
I don't know.
In the NCAA tournament?
Nobody actually...
for beating Drake, Indiana, correct. Houston, and Texas?
You're correct in saying that people look at KenPom.
Yeah.
And judge teams by KenPom.
So here's
correct.
Here's what's going on.
Nobody looks at the net. The only people who look at net are coaches who are like, "Why did we go down?" I'm telling you why you went down.
There's other people
because of the first 13 games you played during the season. You played too many bad teams, and you played too many of those bad teams at home. This is not rocket surgery. Okay, you can fix this. You don't need a narrative. You don't need PR. You need to work on you need Mark Gottfried to figure out your schedule. That's what you need.
So here's what's you mentioned KenPom or Bart Torvik or Net or whatever. I'm going to put it like this. College basketball is incredibly difficult to watch on a national basis.
Sure.
It just is. There's 300 some odd teams playing college
basketball.
basketball.
Notice all of the divergent styles that we've seen in this tournament.
Yes.
And if there's anything I'm ever going to be right about, it's the death of pretty basketball.
Yeah. So that's issue number 1.
Although shouts to Miami for being really good on offense.
It is impossible to get a proper gauge on who's good and who's bad. I'll use Ohio State again as an example out of the Big Ten, when Ohio State, people kept bringing up Ohio State as like a good win for North Carolina this past season. I thought, wait a minute, I thought Ohio State was bad. When they said it was a good win, is because KenPom still had them pretty higher rated, even though when you looked at their schedule, it was all just loss. That
was in the league, though.
Right, but
out of the league, they did what I just said: neutral site.
Okay,
neutral
so
site
if we
away.
all recognize that the metrics
and they
themselves
won some of those games, by the way.
Cool, I get that, but if we can all recognize that some of this stuff is smoke and mirrors, then maybe we need to stop obsessing over what those schedules end up looking like. If we understand it's not a true gauge as to what you do in December,
some of it is smoke and mirrors, and some of it is actually you have to win some of the games. Carolina didn't win any of the important games that they needed to win outside of the league.
But here's
do you know who did? Connecticut did.
But here's what's really going on. Okay,
Ohio State did.
What's really going on here is that for whatever reason, over the last couple of years, and I don't know what it is. It's just an observation of mine. Over the last 5 years, a lot of people have spent time trying to diminish what the ACC is doing. I don't know if it's because of ACC coaches retiring, you don't have Roy Williams anymore, you don't have Mike Krzyzewski, et cetera, or that people get caught up in some of the names that are good with the national media folks that go to the SEC or the Big Ten. It could just be that as college basketball media has contracted to a very small group of people, it is basically the narratives, the conversations are started by those people who are not as interested in ACC basketball, or they don't have coaches in ACC basketball that they're not necessarily down with anymore. It's the equivalent of why the SEC is the tastemaker for college football, because, well, Paul Feinbaum's on ESPN every freaking day telling you what he thinks, and that's what gets the conversation going. That doesn't exist in college basketball. It's basically defined to, and I love Matt Norlander of CBS Sports and Jeff Goodman of Stadium and Rob Doster of Field of 68, but they're the ones who are normally driving the conversation, and usually it's sweaty, breathless, oh my goodness, the Big East is amazing! Nobody does that about the ACC anymore because there's a shoulder shrug with the ACC. So I do not blame ACC fans, because here's what I want people to understand. Nobody's actually saying the ACC is superior or good or whatever. What's happening is a big screw you. When the Mountain West surpasses the ACC in the Ken Pom metric that nobody could tell you what it means, and like, oh my goodness, the Mountain West is better than the ACC. When the ACC does this again, I absolutely expect and I want more ACC people to turn around and go, oh, so what's that metric get you? Last time I checked, the NCAA Tournament is the thing that matters, and here we are again with a chance to win another national championship, or here we are again with another Final Four. This isn't SEC kind of crap. It's more of the classic petty ACC. Oh, did you think we were bad? Or, oh, you were trying to dunk on us? Well, the joke's on you. Here we are again. And there's all sorts of layers to this. I'm just saying I don't fault ACC people or Jim Phillips or whoever for looking at the results over the last 5 years in the NCAA tournament and going, so what did all that regular season success get you in the grand scheme of things? Not what we've gotten. So props to the ACC for at least pointing to the scoreboard in March.